You are listening to the Attempted Adventure Podcast, a podcast all about finding adventure every day and making life a little more interesting. From Bangkok, Thailand, I'm Kyle Desrosiers, joined, as always, by my friend and co-host,
James Barrett from Dallas, Texas.
Well, in this episode, we've got an interview with my younger brother, Fulbright scholar, world traveler, and cultural adventurer, Kyle Desrosiers. Kyle was on the show a couple months ago to talk about his experiences living abroad in Tel Aviv, Israel during COVID-19, and we wanted to have him back on to talk about his experiences post-vaccination, some of his further adventures, both cultural and otherwise. But first, James, what did you do this week? Did you do anything new or adventurous?
I did do something new, not really adventurous. It's been a hell of a week. As you and I have discussed, not going to get too much into that. It's been a week, and so they opened up a Daiso by my house, which, for those of you that don't know, Daiso is a Japanese,
like dollar store.
Dollar store, right. And it's great.
It really is.
And so me and my fiance went there with the specific idea of getting Kalpis Lacto, which they had, and it's delicious. I
do love a glass of Kalpis.
Yes, or Kalpico, as they call it here.
Do you want to explain what Kalpis is to our listeners who might not be familiar?
Kalpis, in Thailand, it is Kalpis Lacto, and it is yogurt-flavored soda. And it sounds disgusting, but it's delicious. It might be my favorite soda of all time.
It's weirdly good, isn't it?
It's so
got
good.
That tang, that you really don't expect with your sodas.
It has different flavors. It's all good. And then I was just looking through the snacks, and I found honey butter potato chips, which I'd never had before, and they were delicious. So good. Asia knows what they're doing with snacks. They know what they're doing. It's good stuff, and so that was my new thing this week: honey butter potato chips.
Listeners, I'll point you once again to James and my very first kind of foray into content creation at Snack Time Asia. It's a series of about 4 videos, I think, and I will have links to them here in the show notes, which you can find, as well as on our website. I got them all uploaded this weekend. They're not great quality because they're all shot on a phone, but they're fun, I hope.
They're fun. Yeah, I like them.
That's very cool. I'm glad that you got to do that because you're right. There's nothing quite like a Japanese snack. You just never know exactly what it's going to be like. And it could sound terrible, and it could be weirdly good.
Like yogurt soda, which I believe is Japanese.
Yeah, I think it is. It shouldn't work. It looks gross. It sounds gross. It has a gross name, Kalpis Lacto.
It's kind of thick, so the texture's kind of gross. I mean, everything about it is kind of gross. I mean, don't ever pour it into a glass because you're not going to want to drink it.
It looks like maybe you've had a thing of yogurt and it's kind of gone bad and it's collected that liquid at the top. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like when the yogurt kind of has separated, it's like you get that, but you just pour that out into a glass. It's just kind of frothy, like yogurt water.
Yeah, but it's delicious. Daiso's fun. It's just full of crap. Think of a Dollar Tree or whatever your version of a dollar store is.
But full of like imported Japanese stuff.
Like super cheap, low-quality Japanese stuff. That's been my new thing this week.
Well, that's fun.
What about you? What have you done this week?
Yeah, I went exploring to a very cool Chinese temple near my house. It's part of a project that I'm kind of working on, and I think we're going to talk more about that next week as I get that going. But I did explore this really cool temple. It was just neat. It was somewhere that I thought was cool. It was a cool place. And I'd been stuck at home so much, and I haven't been out. I haven't really done a ton recently. So kind of getting back into getting outside again was really good.
It's cool. I'm sure you took pictures.
I did. I used my infrared camera, which is part of what we'll talk about next week. I just had a good morning, so it was fun to explore.
Oh, that's really cool.
One final reminder, this is the very last week to get your bird pictures in. So if you've taken a picture of a bird for our monthly challenge, send it to us. hello@attemptedventure.com, subject line challenge. And you know what? Since this episode is going out a bit late, let's say you have the first full week of July to get it in.
Okay. Yeah. That's a good idea.
So send us your birds. We've got some good ones already. My mother sent a very nice picture of a house finch.
Nice.
Yeah, and I will tell you about mine next week when we do our wrap-up. I have a pretty good bird for you.
Great.
Well, are you ready to get on with this episode, James?
Yes, I am. Just right into the interview.
Okay. Without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, my brother, Kyle Desrosiers from Tel Aviv, Israel. All right, well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Attempted Venture. Today I'm joined kind of spontaneously by my brother Kyle, who was a guest on an episode a little over a month ago. Kyle's in Tel Aviv, Israel, and last time he was on, he talked a little bit about his experiences there with COVID, with celebrating some holidays and festivals, and now he's back. And we decided to hop on Zencastr and record our conversation. Kyle, welcome back to the show. How you doing?
Thank you for having me. I am just fine.
So I've got a couple things I wanted to chat with you about today, some of your recent adventures.
Yes.
First is actually related to your entry in our monthly coffee challenge, making coffee outdoors. Yeah, you sent a super cool picture of you making Turkish coffee at the Sea of Galilee, and I think you said that was on a camping trip, right?
It was a camping trip, and a crazy, crazy camping trip at that. We set out to do this thing called the Jesus Trail, and so never do the Jesus Trail. It will really lead you astray. And honestly, when you go on the Jesus Trail, you're likely to meet Jesus, if you know what I mean.
Wait, I don't know what you mean.
I mean, it's just disastrous, and maybe you'll hallucinate, and you'll get so lost.
Okay.
And anyways.
It's an actual trail. It's an actual trail, right? Like a hiking trail?
Yeah, and so it's supposedly, it goes to these sites that are mentioned in the Christian Bible, right? So you start in Nazareth, and it's made for tourists. So I think if it wasn't Corona, you would see all these Americans and Europeans and Brazilians and whatever, and even some like Israeli Jews do it. You will start in Nazareth, and there's all these like little Arab villages you can go through, which are really pretty. And the trail is not clearly demarcated. The maps don't make any sense. These trails are not on Google Maps either. So you really got to be old school. And I was with my friend from China and my friend from Mexico, and we set out this camping trip. And from the beginning, Michael, I knew we weren't prepared. I've backpacked before. We did not have backpacks. We had really heavy sleeping bags.
How did you carry them?
Well, I mean, we had backpacks, but we didn't have backpacks that were suited for a 30-kilometer per day trek, because there's the strap across the belly and the proper equipment. And we had really heavy sleeping bags that we tied on with string. And from the beginning, I was like, guys, we should just stay in a hotel. I just don't want to, we're not prepared. I really had this sense, and I was right. And they were like, whatever. No, so, I wanted to be cool. And anyways, the bags got extremely heavy. And my friend Xiaomin's backpack, because it's just a school backpack, it broke like in the Nazareth market. And so we had to get a needle and thread, and he sewed it and he fixed it. And so we go through all these Arab villages. We set off way too late. People are really like staring at us, because here we are, just 3 foreigners, and they don't see many tourists, and certainly not during Corona. And people are inviting us in for coffee like many, many times. We didn't because of Corona, but we politely declined. But I think they were really excited to see people. And we find this trail sort of through the hills, and we leave the villages, and we think it's the trail, but it's not well marked, and it's getting late. We were done. We set off way too late. And my friend is like, let's take a shortcut. Let's go through these farms. And I'm like,
no. That's like mistake number 1. If you're hiking, always stay on the trail.
Well, that's what I said, but we lost the trail, Michael. Like, we're a few kilometers past the villages, and it's these hills, these rolling hills. It's the Mediterranean Judean hills or whatever. And the trail suddenly becomes overgrown by grass, and there's no trail anyways. And so he's like, okay, this is the Google map. This is the direction in which we need to go. And so let's just cut through. And I was like, okay, but are there landmines? Like, are people going to be really upset if we're trespassing in their property?
Right, yeah.
And there's high grass. I'm like, I don't want to get bit by a snake.
There's definitely vipers in Israel.
Broods of vipers. And we do make it out, and it's incredibly beautiful, but I'm getting incredibly frustrated, and it's starting to get dark. We finally find this trail that's in like an official campsite, and we want to camp there, but we don't have water. So we have to keep walking so we can find water.
It was like primitive camping?
Yeah, but I mean, other people had cars. I mean, it had campsites, but there was just no tap. I mean, we walk even more kilometers, finally get to a gas station, but this is after like the Jesus Trail disintegrates. Like we lost the trail. We don't know where it was. We ended up walking on the road. We ended up walking on the highway. We weren't even to Galilee. We were just in the middle of nowhere. But long story short is we ended up staying the night in someone's like the spare room that they rent out because I was tired and desperate and we couldn't find a campground anywhere. We were so lost, so confused, and we stumbled across this community where they had this spare room, and someone called someone, and we did have to pay for it, but we got a shower and we had a bed, and so that was the first night, and we made it to Capernaum, but we actually took the bus a bit because we were all just kind of frustrated by then. And we did sleep in the national park, which was like technically closed, and we were the only ones there, and there were all these howling dogs and jackals and things all night, which was very creepy. And something touched my friend Rodrigo's leg in the night.
Were you sleeping outside?
We were sleeping in the tent, but something poked him through the tent, and we think it was a cat. We hope it was a cat.
But what if it was a man?
Well, we decided not to investigate, Michael. We were so lost, and we were so alone, and it was dark, and we were wandering, and anyways, it was just improperly planned. But the Sea of Galilee was beautiful. The next day, we were kind of just over it all, so we came home. we slept 2 nights, I guess.
I didn't realize that you guys had walked like that because you had this really, it looked heavy, or at least very large coffee setup.
I was not prepared. I'm like, I knew better.
Like, you don't make Turkish coffee when you're backpacking. You make instant coffee.
What's the difference? I mean, it's not that much heavier.
I mean, you had that, like, big pot to brew it in.
Oh, yeah. So, anyways, that's my coffee story.
Well, sounds great. I mean, I love a camping trip. So you and I have already said that when I come and visit, hopefully we can go camping. And
we'll do it better. We won't backpack. We'll just chill. You know, I had like all these like Exodus kind of experiences like right around Pesach because I had that, and then I had this experience where I meant to ride my bike like from here to Herzliya, which is north of here, like 20 or 30 kilometers, and I got extremely lost, and I ended up on a kibbutz. I got chased by another scary dog, and I had to get back because I was going to the Seder that night, and I had to like actually take a cab, but one of the cab wouldn't take me because he had a Mercedes and he didn't want to put my bike in it. And finally I found a cab, got back, made it, but I was like really sunburned, also really dehydrated. Clearly I'm not doing well at preparing.
Yeah, now you understand how people can get lost for 40 years.
Especially with these highways, like it's really no wonder. Like I mean, I can't imagine. Like Moses must have been very annoyed going around all these highways. I'm sure he had some road rage.
I'm sure he did, man. Well, yeah. I mean, but you know, every failed adventure has a story to tell, right?
So here's what I can tell you about. I can tell you about Passover with Chabadniks. I can tell you about Easter, the Benedictine Abbey. And I can also tell you about this interfaith meeting I went to that was in Hebrew that I didn't understand.
Well, let's do all three. Let's start with what was chronologically first. It was Passover, obviously. All right. Well, let's talk about your experiences in Israel during Passover because that happened not so long ago. How was Passover?
So I went with one of my friends, and he's like the only like person in my program who's, I mean, he's pretty Orthodox. I don't know if he would consider himself Orthodox anymore, but he wanted to go to a Seder, and I wanted to go to a Seder, and we were trying to invite ourselves over to someone's house, but it didn't really happen, so we ended up going to Chabad because he knows some of the Chabad rabbis, and And I don't know, so I was like, okay, sure, why not? So there's this place called Chabad on the coast, right? And it's like an English-speaking community. And it's funny because here we are, like in Israel, but some of like the biggest Orthodox communities are for like English speakers who are from the States or from England,
Interesting.
Canada. And so anyway, so they had this Seder, and the prayers were in Hebrew, but everything else was in English, and they narrated it with all of these stories, and it was very intuitive, very easy to follow because they explained everything. Because the whole point of Chabad is that they want to bring people in who are like secular, who do not keep the laws, who are interested in experiencing Jewish life, and so they explain it all. They tell you how to wash your hands, how to because washing your hands is part of the Seder, and they tell you how to do the prayers and what to say, and then explain each food that you eat. And anyways, so everything that happened, what from the first kiddush and the blessing of the wine and the different foods, they had a story to tell. The rabbi and the wife of the rabbi and the children of the rabbi, they each got to kind of they spoke a bit, and they made it very interesting. And I sat by this Italian Jewish family in my friend Shmuel, and we sat by this Italian Jewish family who were like super nice. They had like these like teenage sons who were just very funny, and the atmosphere was just very laid back. And it was just a really pleasant night. You have to drink a lot of wine. It's a mitzvah. It's a commandment to drink a lot of wine. You drink 4 cups, at least.
Yeah.
And there was some singing, and it got kind of rowdy. And this is the world that we're in when everyone had the green pass, so they were all vaccinated, so we could have this event. I mean,
is it like the first real celebration since most people are vaccinated?
Yes, and everyone, I told you I got annoyed because everyone is like, I tell them I study conflict resolution, and they're like, oh, you're in Israel, ha ha ha. And now I get annoyed because everyone's like, wow, like we're all vaccinated, we're so free, and I swear, it's the same thing. If someone's talking about Passover and Easter, it doesn't matter. They are talking about like these are holidays that symbolize new beginnings and spring, and it's like we're vaccinated, we're free, woo, which of course is a very incomplete story. Like the rest of the world isn't like this, and even in Israel, like I'm not sure that like we should really feel that this is the the apocalypse in a good way. I mean,
okay.
But anyway, but that was like the major motif. They were like, okay, last year they couldn't gather for the Seder, and they're like, this year, like here we are, we can gather for it together to commemorate Passover, and it's like it's a festival about liberation and freedom and joy. And Chabad came from the diaspora, and Chabad came from Europe, and when all these Chabad rabbis first began to try to sort of discover their strain of Judaism, like they could not envision that the state of Israel would exist, and they really endured horrible persecution in Europe, and pogrom and slaughter and violence and just social ostracization, and what the jobs they could have, where they could live, so restricted. And the whole thing about Passover is at the very end. You know what they say? They say next year in Jerusalem.
Next year in Jerusalem, yeah.
And so not really Jerusalem, but Tel Aviv is like, it's good enough, I guess. But the one thing that really stuck with me is that the rabbi, first of all, he had this amazing tie that was like a matzah tie. Like his tie was like matzah. you know matzah, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm a big fan of fun ties.
Yeah. He concluded this very humorous, rowdy, lively Seder, with a very somber story about how, his ancestors survived the Holocaust. that they were in Auschwitz or one of the camps, and how they wanted to keep all of the fasts and they wanted to observe all of the holidays, and how I think it was Yom Kippur, when people are fasting, and the Nazis, like, to torment them, they brought all the food. You've heard this, right? How they brought like all the one time they give them adequate food was the day when observant Jews are supposed to fast, and have been for thousands of years. And so the Nazis brought like this like adequate food for once, after the people in the camps were starving to death, and they bring the food and they're tormenting them just to humiliate them.
So psychologically, yeah.
Psychological humiliation, just like they brought pork and stuff like that at different times,
Mm-hmm.
He told this story about how his ancestor, who was a rabbi, he resisted and he resisted, and he kept true to the commandments and true to his Judaism, and just tried to respond with joy and with compassion to all of these cruelties and the taunts from the Nazi soldiers, and I think the Nazi got so frustrated that he was not caving and not giving in, that he like beat him or something, and he's like, how can you follow these rules? How can you keep to your faith in spite of all this? Like, it's insane. I don't understand. How can you do it? Something like this. And he's like, I have three words for you, or 4 words. And he's like, next year in Jerusalem, and of course the rabbi was telling this story in a very, dramatic delivery. And that was the conclusion of the Seder. So,
wow,
it truly is the holiday in which they reflect, like, this is what Israel stands for today. And when you understand all of that, it really brings a whole lot of perspective you don't usually get, in terms of...
It's really powerful, yeah.
And that's how it ended. That's how the Seder ended. So really to bring it sort of full circle. And so it was very meaningful to me just to be there and to learn from them.
That's amazing. That is super cool. I mean, these are the kind of experiences that you can't really plan for, These are the kind of things that when you're abroad or something that they're organic, and they're some of the most powerful experiences that you can have. That's amazing. I would love to do that. Maybe next year in Jerusalem, you and I can get together. We'll see. I mean,
yes,
it'd be really fun if I can come for a holiday next year.
Michael, I really love these holidays. I really like, every time I have the opportunity to do something that's like Jewish life, Jewish holidays, I'm really into it. Like, I'm into it than most of my Jewish classmates, but I have some friends who are like very into it. So I'm always like, take me with you, let's go. And
that's how I am here. I'm like, it's Loy Krathong. I got to get my float ready. Like, I get really excited about the Thai holidays here. It's great. Well, here's the deal. Next year, you are invited. Hopefully, if you're there, it'll be easier and cheaper for you to get over here. You are invited for Songkran, if it happens, and Loy Krathong next year. And I'll go there for, I don't know, Passover, Easter, Christmas. I don't know. I'll try to go for a holiday.
Everything. You're always invited. Next year, I'll have an apartment. I'm not living in the dorm anymore. I'm actually really excited. I think it makes a lot of sense, and there's so much to learn here. So I'm going to stay.
That's what I said when I stayed for my second year, and now I live here.
Oh, Michael, don't tell Mom. No, I don't think that's going to happen.
Well, never say never.
No, but there's another holiday, and I feel like all I do is talk about the holidays, but they're just so cool. Okay.
Well, here's the thing. I mean, adventures come from a lot of different angles. And like I said last time, you are a cultural adventurer. And you had your camping trip. But what I want to talk to you about is this, because, I mean, really, Israel in general is kind of famous for its religious festivals. Right. So, yeah. So what was next? It would have been Holy Week, right?
It was. So I went to the Good Friday liturgy in the Church of the Holy Sepulcher.
Did you have a better experience the second time you went there?
I was going to say, being vaccinated, I felt a lot more comfortable.
Okay.
I went with a friend I met on Twitter who's from Brazil, who teaches at Hebrew University in Jerusalem. And he was like, okay, I'm bringing us cushions quit. And I was like, what? And he was like, so we can kneel like comfortably. Because in the Good Friday liturgy, there's like a lot of kneeling. And, the Church of the Holy Sepulcher is not like a Vatican II parish, right? There's not like comfy pews. There actually are not pews at all.
You're on the stone floor.
So it's a very weird building, and there's all the Christian sects who are fighting with each other to control it. And they all have
all have shrines, right? And altars.
It's very confusing.
Yeah.
And really like a testament to just horrible failure at ecumenism. Just seriously, like there's really so much infighting, and it's really a shame. So we went for the Good Friday liturgy, and it's an interesting time to go because it's not crowded, Michael. Normally you're like sardines in a little tin, and here we can actually see everything. So the way that this church works, it's super weird, right? But you have Golgotha upstairs. I don't even know how to explain it. It's like this big stone cave, but it's a church. Mm-hmm. And you have at the bottom part, it's that, you've probably seen it, that big stone, the stone of where they anointed Jesus's body before burial. Right. And people will like kiss it. I would not during Corona. But I told someone this, and he was like, yeah, that's such a Western attitude. And I was like, yeah, like, I don't know, like I went to an Orthodox church and you're like supposed to kiss the priest's hand. And I'm like, I'm not doing that. I just went for a handshake. But anyways, I digress. But so we went in, and anyways, there's like this upper gallery kind of. And there's an altar here where it's Golgotha. So it's like the last two stations of the cross. There's like a Greek altar, and there's like a Latin altar. Anyways, it's the last station of the cross, so Golgotha. So where was the cross? And I think it's the last two. So I don't remember the second to last station is now. I can't remember, but it's Jesus dying and then Jesus after he dies.
Okay, but there's two stations inside the church, right?
There's more than two. Okay. Because actually in the place where they say he resurrected is not one of the stations, because the station ends with his death. Because where he resurrects is a different part of the church, but it's all under the same roof. So we were standing below, and because of Corona, there was a very limited number of people that could go up. So they had like a choir of like Franciscan priests or monks, and they went up, but most of us had to stay down because of Corona. So we couldn't actually see the people singing or speaking. Not really. We could kind of see them. Yeah, so the liturgy was like 2 or 3 hours long. So my friend really was smart with these cushions. We were the only ones with the cushions.
Wow. These are the inside scoops you can only get here, folks.
And then the singing was beautiful and the chanting. And so I followed along in English. And I actually had a pretty meaningful time. I really always was distrustful of the Latin. But now I'm like sort of coming to appreciate it more, because it's really, the whole idea of it is that it would be universal. Of course, like we all always are as humans, we screw it up. We screw everything up.
In the U.S., it's different, because in the U.S., everybody's more or less speaking the same language. Whereas when you're in Israel, like you're describing a very international community.
That's how it is with the Christians here. Yeah.
And it reflects in a very different light, doesn't it?
So that's how it was. And just the chanting was beautiful. And it's talking all about how people just failed to follow God, and failed to show justice, and failed to show compassion, and failed to show mercy. And, ultimately, like, it's the service is commemorating Jesus dying, right? That's Good Friday.
Yeah. And
so what they do is, like, they have this whole, all these symbolism, where they have, like, their communion liturgy, and they don't have the Eucharistic liturgy, but they serve communion that's already been sanctified, because they don't sanctify it on Good Friday. But then they take it and they put it inside of the tomb. They put like the communion elements inside of the tomb, like in the Holy Sepulcher, like it's symbolically of like Jesus's body going to the tomb.
The body that they're burying, yeah.
And then like it ends, and everyone is supposed to be mournful and like feel really guilty. And like one of my very few like traditional opinions about religion is like, I think a little bit of guilt is okay, because we really do some bad things, and we need to take some time to reflect on that. I mean bad things, like we participate in a lot of things that hurt people,
as a society, even.
As a society,
and even unintentionally, we can hurt people just even not even meaning to, a lot of times. And I think that's important to be mindful and cognizant of.
And that's kind of what Good Friday is about. It's mournful, and it's like taking responsibility for doing it. And Good Friday is a really significant holiday for Catholic interfaith relations. It's at Vatican II, they revised the Good Friday liturgy because there used to be a lot of, in a lot of the English translations of the Bible, use the word Jew in a very derogatory way. Like when it talks about the people who antagonize Jesus, they say the Jews. You know what I mean? And just these translations are so wrong and so derogatory, and it's just not true to the original text. And in the Good Friday liturgy before Vatican II, there were all these prayers about like how the Jews turn their back on God and the Jews need to convert. And just these things that were so horrible and just failed to acknowledge the humanity and the divinity and integrity of Jewish people and of all people. And so at Vatican II, they changed these prayers and they really tried to express like that these are our cousins, and really tried to say instead, make the focus is that who killed Jesus is like, for one, it's the Romans, but also like symbolically, right. It's like everyone,
it's
right?
Those
like,
Latin speakers that you love.
I know, but the whole point is that they made the focus more on like, we're responsible. Everyone's responsible because everyone does such violence and exploitation and just there's so much in the world that like we are responsible for. And that's what they revised it. And they revised it to make the prayers more about like praising God and blessing God for the covenant with Israel and the covenant with the Jewish people.
Right.
And so it's not much, but it's a symbolic shift. And that's a very interesting thing to think about, being in Israel, being in this liturgy that's after Vatican II, and like how it tried to shift some of the relationship between Christians and Jews in the world.
Interesting.
And Vatican II really focused on that, and Good Friday liturgy really focus on that. I hope that's not too niche.
No, that is super cool. Not at all. Wow. Well, I'm glad that you had a better experience the second time, because I know you were kind of down on it your first time that you visited. I've sometimes found that going back to a place that disappointed you very much the first time can give you a new perspective, and you can like it a lot better the second time.
And on Easter Sunday, I went to the Benedictine Abbey at, I think it's Abu Ghosh, and it's the French Benedictine Abbey. No, but it's like this like beautiful like castle type thing with all these like frescoes that were really old, and they had this beautiful choir with like the sisters and the brothers, and it was in Latin and it was in French. And
you sent me a picture of a nun holding some bread.
Yes, and during the mass there was this procession of the children, and they like brought the bread to the altar, and the nuns baked all this bread like in the shape of like a sheep and a duck and something else, little animals, to commemorate the spring. And I guess it's a French thing, because most of them were French. After the mass, they were like, oh, there's some refreshments. So I go, and there's like wine and like some different like liqueurs and a vegetable tray and olives and crackers and this amazing bread that was like blue cheese and walnuts in the bread. And I was like, oh,
that sounds really good. That sounds so good.
Yeah, it was delicious. They kept bringing like breads and cheeses and things, and I was like, wow, this is so nice. I'm going to eat so much bread because I'm hungry. And I had some wine, and there's this orange wine that the brothers made at the monastery.
Orange wine.
They stepped on the
like
grape.
Made of oranges, actually, or the orange color?
No. I think it's with grapes and with oranges. It was like a bit like port. Like it was very, very sweet. It was good. It was like aperitif. You cannot drink too much of it. Then all of a sudden, I'm talking to them. I talked to a couple of the brother monks. They were really nice. I met like the French ambassador or somebody to Israel. I don't know. I don't really care about that sort of thing so much. I would rather talk to nuns.
Sure.
But then they ring the bell and they're like, come eat. And I'm like, eat? What? I thought this was it.
You just gorge yourself on bread.
Normally you get like donuts or coffee. I mean, like, and I would go to like the student ministries or whatever, and they would give you like a sandwich if you're lucky or whatever. Here, it was like this 3 or 4 course meal. There was like quiche and rice and soup and bread. Wow. And all of this red wine. So much wine. There was salads. There was just several courses, and they kept bringing different stuff. And behind the abbey, in their sort of castle walls, there was all these beautiful tables set up and picnics with white tablecloths and flowers everywhere. Then they had dessert with these huge chocolate eggs and cakes and tarts, and like the sisters and the brothers made all this stuff, and maybe some of the community members brought some of it, and it was just amazing. It was so French, and it was like some of the best I've eaten since I've been here, and I just was not expected. I was just gonna go to the church, and that was it. And then there was this whole picnic. They had this little Easter egg hunt for the kids, and the nuns were like throwing candy, and there were all these old nuns, and old nuns are just the best. I swear, like there's nobody better. And I just felt like the sisters and the brothers, they just had so much joy just talking to them. I was like, wow, like, they really have a beautiful life. You know, they really, like, they live there, and they just had so much joy, and they were smiling and happy, and it was just such a lovely day. And the kids, all the children were hunting for their Easter eggs, and lots of candy and lots of wine, and then we had coffee.
Something tells me that you had a lot of wine that day. You might have mentioned that once or twice.
I had a lot of food too, and I don't know. It was really nice, and that's actually where I'm planning on going on a retreat this weekend. I have no idea what I'm gonna do. I was like, "What does one do on a retreat?" And they were like, "You just like you're sitting quiet." And I was like, "Well, I don't know if I can do that. Maybe there's some hiking.
Right.
Maybe I'll read a book." But yeah, so it was really, really meaningful to me. I had such a wonderful day because this is the first time I've gone to do stuff like this, you know, with the Passover and with the Easter. It's the first time I've gone to do stuff like this in quite a long time. So that was Easter, and I have to tell you about one last thing. Memorial Day, I think you'll find very meaningful. Well, two things. So Yom HaShoah, the day where you remember the Holocaust, it's the same week as Yom HaZikaron. I think it's hard to pronounce, but the first one is Yom HaShoah, which is the day of remembering the Shoah, the Holocaust. Mm-hmm. And they play a 2-minute siren, like 10 or 11 in the morning, and everyone stands up and is silent. And if you're driving a car on the highway, they'll stop the cars, and they'll get out of the cars, and they'll stand in the highway. Everyone. Even if you're in your house. At the time, I was with my Israeli friend in his home, and we were sitting and watching TV, and he was like, we get up and stand, you know? And they're playing the siren on the TV. You can hear it in the streets, and all the cars on the highway stop, and you just think, like, what was lost? What was taken? Like, just the horrible atrocity of it. I think Israel is such a controversial place for people, and rightly so. I mean, what the government does, what the army does. But if anyone hates Israel, they should be here on Yom HaShoah, because I think it would change them. Anyways, but yeah, I have friends whose parents or grandparents, survived the Holocaust, and some of them are alive still, and they remember it, and it colored them, and it's like a part of life here, and it's a part of the collective memory here. And I went to an event where a woman spoke on Zoom. She wasn't actually there, but we got to sit outside all together on the balcony and Zoom with her, and she's talking about her experiences as a baby in Poland and in Romania.
Wow.
So anyways, I thought I would share that with you.
That's wow. I can't imagine what that must feel like. Wow. Well, that is very heavy. I don't know how to come back from that.
Sorry to go on and on, but I have one thing that I also really want to say. So Yom HaZikaron is the day of Israel Memorial Day for soldiers and also for victims of terror attacks. And they do a lot of really cool things today. There's like some joint interfaith ones. There's some joint memorial services for both Jews and Arabs who are victims of this conflict, which is like provocative, right? Because a lot of people don't want to acknowledge that there's suffering on both sides. And a lot of people in Tel Aviv don't want to acknowledge how the Palestinians have suffered. So there's all these projects about the joint suffering and the joint memorialization, and that's very cool. But I got to actually read and speak and present. I told you this, and I can send you a short video clip later if you're interested.
Yeah, please do.
I got to read and speak and present at the Yom HaZikaron service on campus. So it was in English. There was a little Hebrew, but mostly English. And I got to read what's called Yitzkor, and sort of like a prayer to remember the blessed memories of those who have died. And there was a big turnout. It was very cool. We were on the balcony of the building where they have the international program based. And so there's another siren on this day when everyone stands. So we began the ceremony with this introduction. The siren played. I got to read this poem. There was a couple people who sang, this girl who did the national anthem. And we just took a moment to like really put a very personalized face with these young men and women who died, like younger than me. I mean, they were in the army, and there was this one guy from Texas, actually. His name was Sean Carmelli, and we spoke about him. I spoke about him, which is interesting, being from Texas too. He came to Israel, made Aliyah, where you become an Israeli, and he was like what you call a lone soldier, someone with no family here, and he died at like 22. So it's a day to memorialize it and reflect on what was lost. And there's so much patriotism, which I personally don't get behind. I don't agree with all the wars, and I don't agree with what's happening, but I will always mourn the dead, because these people, they could have had love and family and career and all this life, and they didn't.
Wow, that is I don't even know what to say. That's just, all of that is incredible and just really important.
It's interesting because you have I think every Jewish holiday is like this. You have the mourning and you have the joy. Mm-hmm. And I mean, our Christian holidays are like this too, some of them. Easter's like this. And that's how all the Jewish holidays are. It's like about persecution and about resilience, and then it's about celebration and life and perseverance. And after Memorial Day, you have Independence Day. And Independence Day is when everyone parties and goes with their family and they barbecue. I went to the park, and there was so much smoke, Michael. The sky was like brown.
From so many barbecues?
From so many barbecues. And you can like smell the meat. You can smell the meat from like a kilometer away. And like there was like dust in the air. It was so strange. And I was like, wow, like this is how global warming works. I mean, but I don't mean that like barbecuing is not causing global warming. But like in the little space, you could see how it just turned the atmosphere
right
brown. And it smelled so good, even though I'm a vegetarian.
right.
It reminded me of Turkey. It's a very like Middle East thing, I feel like, where you have all these families grilling meat in the park. And there was a park I used to walk through in Berlin every day, where it would be all the Turkish and Arab families, and they would have their little kebab, and it would just be smoke, like so much smoke, like in this park, and you would cough when you walk through it. I'm like, I don't know how you can hang out here for hours. But that's how it was, and it was nice, and people were with kites and soccer and volleyball and celebrating, because you have this and you have that, the morning, and then you have the celebration.
There's the dichotomy, right?
The dichotomy. So that's how the week ended. So the week ended with the celebration. Yeah.
What is your next big adventure? You got anything planned in the next couple weeks?
Well, I'm going to this retreat, I think, next Saturday, with the Benedictines. I have no idea what's going to happen, Michael. If I really have to like meditate and pray, I'm going to go crazy. I know that on their website, they're like, you pay a little bit. It's like pay what you can, right? And you join them for meals, and I think you join them for one of their like daily prayers, or you join them for mass or something. I don't really know. And which I'm happy to do. They were like, we don't care what religion you are or what you believe, but we would like if you join us for meals and you join us, in our prayers or something like that. And but then I'm like, what do I do the rest of the day? Like, I hope I don't have to like just hang out and meditate. No, but I mean, I don't really know. I was like, what do people normally do when they stay here? Maybe I can help them garden or something. That would be fun.
Yeah, get a book. Just enjoy some relaxation.
So I'm excited. So I don't really know what's going to happen, but I'm going to stay in this monastery in Abu Ghosh. And so I'm going for a retreat. So I'm pretty sure I'm going to just turn off my cell phone like the whole weekend. So I'm like, I don't even know how to not do anything. So that will be an adventure in and of itself.
Kyle, thank you so much again for coming on the show. I love talking with you.
Well, Thank you so much for having me, Michael. It's a blast as always.
Thank you for listening, ladies and gentlemen. And now, back to the rest of the show. Okay, welcome back to Attempted Venture. And again, thank you, Kyle, for coming on the show once again to talk about what you've been up to.
He always has good stories.
But, we appreciate Kyle coming on. He does have good stories. He does a lot of cool stuff, especially now that he's vaccinated. So the first thing he talked about was his camping trip at the Sea of Galilee and sort of the disaster that went along with that. And let that be a warning to those of you who are inexperienced hikers.
Your brother isn't. Your brother has experience.
He is, but his friends weren't. And like he was even saying in the episode, I was trying to tell them this is a bad idea, but I think he got peer pressured into just going along with it because all of his friends were doing it. Because he's done stuff. I mean, he worked at Rocky Mountain National Park for a while. Like, he's done this kind of stuff before. He knows what he's doing, but I think his friends really wanted to do this, and he just kind of got dragged along.
One of the worst things you can do is try and go on like a trek like that unprepared.
Yes.
But at the end of the day, it's a good story, no matter how it was when it was happening.
Right. As long as nobody got injured and as long as it turned out all right in the end.
It's fun now.
Right. Type 2 fun. Type 2 fun is fun that's fun afterwards.
Which that definitely seems like type 2 fun.
But I did look up the Jesus Trail, and it's a very cool trek around Galilee. If you're into like through hiking in Israel, it's a cool one to look into, I think. The whole thing is 65 kilometers, and it takes you around Galilee, including the old town of Nazareth and some historical sites, and then up to the Lake of Galilee itself, which I think is where they have the national park, which is where it kind of mostly is centered. So 65 kilometers. So, a couple days. Bad. It's not bad at all, like 30-something miles. A couple of days of hiking and camping. I think it'd be a fun thing to do if you were prepared.
But he got a good picture out of it. But now he can say he's been camping at the Sea of Galilee, which is cool.
Then after that, he talked about his experiences at Holy Week, how he decided to go to Good Friday at the Holy Sepulcher and give it another chance because he had such a kind of negative experience the first time. And the second time, he was a lot happier. Re-experiencing it maybe with the right mindset. He enjoyed it a lot more. And so I think that was actually pretty cool to go back to somewhere that you really didn't enjoy and see if it's any different the next time. See if you have a better experience out of it.
It's cool that he went back because it's real easy just to, I don't like it, and you never go back. I have a place that's exactly like that for me, and that's Ayutthaya in Thailand. The first time we went, I was horribly jet lagged, and it was super hot and really cool stuff. But there are certain times where even like super interesting, cool stuff can't help it. And then when we went back, I had a great time. It was wonderful. Because I think even that first time that we went, even you were having like not that great of a time.
I think we were just really tired. We were trying to squeeze way too much in to like 4 days.
Yeah. But, we went back and now it's one of my favorite places. It's amazing.
Sometimes it is just about the mindset. So I was glad that he had the chance to re-experience something that he maybe wasn't fond of the first time. Let's see, he had Easter with the old nuns at like the medieval French abbey. That sounded fun. Holocaust Remembrance Day, Israeli Memorial Day, Independence Day. Yeah, I never thought we'd be talking about the Holocaust on Attempted Venture, and yet here we are. I mean, it's part, if we're going to talk about Israel, it's just going to come up. And it sounded like a really moving experience, both Holocaust Remembrance Day and Memorial Day. It's these sort of modern Memorial Days that are very, very moving. It's not celebrating something ancient. Right. Celebrating something that happened, to a generation that is still living. And the Memorial Day is honoring people from both sides of the conflict who have been killed in the violence between Israel and Palestine. It's a very uniquely Israeli thing, and I think it's really great that he gets the chance to kind of participate in these, not just witness them, but participate in them.
Definitely. And, this is not quite the same, but, following him on Instagram and things like that, it's interesting to see him getting out more and more and experiencing the culture more.
Right.
It's very different from what I was expecting.
His first several months, he was completely locked down, and he hasn't gotten the chance to really show us what his life was like there. Yeah, and so now we get to actually see just day-to-day life in Tel Aviv.
And I knew very little about Israel and even less about Tel Aviv. But I don't know what I was expecting, but it's not what he's shown me. It's a very modern, very open city. And I don't know if it's just because whenever I think Israel, I think biblical, and for
Right.
whatever reason, your brain goes immediately back to that. But it's not like that.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff going on, but it's interesting to see how like the people are interacting. He's
Yes.
showing like how pride is celebrated in Israel, and that's not something I would have thought of being like a thing at all. But that's just
apparently it's a huge deal in Tel Aviv.
Mm-hmm. And it was super cool to see.
I mean, Tel Aviv is like a hub for IT and the tech industry, and it's got a lot of international businesses. It's not what you think of. Apparently it's a big party spot. Like apparently a lot of people party hard in Tel Aviv, which again, you might not think about when you think about Israel.
No, and I think that's because when people think of Israel, they just think of Jerusalem.
Like very Orthodox religious.
And Jerusalem is more like that, I would think. But Tel Aviv is just like just a city.
We have an impression about these places, and sometimes until we actually go there or actually experience them, we can't really know what it's like.
I know for a fact people that have visited Texas for the first time, and they're very, I think, probably let down a little bit.
Yeah.
Because it's not anything like it. If you want the cowboys, you go west. You'll find them.
Right.
They do exist, but the horses and desert and everything else, not over here. And it's funny because it's the same kind of thing. People have this impression of a place and they go there and they're like, what is this? This isn't what I thought. Or like Paris syndrome for people that, have this huge idea of what Paris will be like, and they go and then go, oh.
So I'm glad to get the chance to talk to him, and I would like to have him back on again sometime soon.
Definitely. But it was really interesting to hear about the different holidays and things like that. And so I enjoyed listening to it. And
yeah.
I'm excited to have him back on.
Definitely. And hopefully that will be pretty soon.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, thank you again, Kyle, for coming on the show. And now it is time to move on to our favorite segment, Adventures in the News. This week, it's my turn, James, and I think that a trip to Ayutthaya is in my future, speaking of Ayutthaya. Because a lot of things have aligned lately. Craig from one of the last episodes sent me a map for a great bike route from Bangkok to Ayutthaya that I want to try out. And then just recently, this is my news, it was announced that Ayutthaya is being added to the next Michelin guide. So, all of these things together, biking, food, these are all things I'm into. So I think a trip to Ayutthaya is coming up in my future. So I'm very excited about this. I'm a big fan of Michelin-starred food, especially if it's like local food, like street food that's won Michelin stars. Because to me, that's a lot cooler than like a fine dining fancy restaurant that won one,
You have been to the one haven't you?
So the famous one here in Bangkok is J Phai's restaurant, the little old lady with the big goggles who cooks in her giant wok. I think it's great. So this new Michelin guide is now going to cover Bangkok, Chiang Mai, and Ayutthaya, with Ayutthaya being the newest city.
Nice.
So I got to pick up a copy of that, hop on my bike, take my camera, and hopefully plan a trip. It says Ayutthaya will be highlighted as a remarkable gastro-tourism destination for all ages due to its perfect blend of old glamour and new charm, with a diverse range of local attractions to cater to all interests.
That's really awesome. That's pretty true.
Man, there's a picture here of a giant river prawn, which has been splayed open and looks amazing.
Man, I'm hungry. All right, everybody. Thank you again for listening. We really do appreciate it. We love talking to y'all, and just thank you. What else can I say? A little reminder about the challenge of the month, which have an extended deadline through the first week of July. You have an extra week for the challenge, which is practice your nature photography and take a picture of a bird. Send us your best bird. You can find us at attemptedventure.com. You can find us on Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, all at Attempted Venture. You can find us on Twitter at AttemptPod. Feel free to email us anytime you want, hello@attemptedventure.com, or click the little contact us button on the website and you'll send it straight to our inbox. We love you guys giving suggestions about things. It makes our day. So again, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for listening. We appreciate each and every one of you. And until next time,
keep adventuring.